Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today. We're really happy to be introducing Tristan Post, an AI strategist, public speaker, freelance consultant, educator, and expert in AI strategy and leadership on how to deliver real business value with AI. My name is Julie, and I'm working as a product manager at Data Scientist. In just a couple of words, we're a training institute specializing in, you guessed it, analytics and data science. Now, before we start off things, just a quick reminder that you can always ask your questions, whatever the platform you're on, whether on LinkedIn or YouTube. So don't hesitate to challenge us and ask plenty of questions that we'll be able to showcase. Through the journey, I'll be the presenter, but without further ado, let me introduce Tristan to the scene and hand over the floor to him for the introduction.
So perfect. Can I start? Or should I wait still?
Yes, go ahead. The
Okay.
floor is
So
yours.
should we start or should we wait 1 or 2 minutes? So I'm always happy to start.
I think we can start.
Okay, perfect. I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Tristan. I'm gonna tell a little bit more about me or about myself in a second. Just for you to know, I'm actually a rare case in the AI and data science community because in my professional life I haven't written one single line of code, and my background is not mathematics, computer science, or anything else, but actually I'm an economist and philosopher by training, but I always would consider myself to be a storyteller. And this is always how I like to start kind of like my presentations. And the story I like to tell when we're talking about artificial intelligence is I like to ask myself actually, where are we coming from and where is it that we are going? And this brings me to the very beginning of our human existence and asking myself, well, what is it that makes us really special as a human species? And there are a lot of things that distinguish us from other species. It's not the ability to use tools. Other animals can do this as well, but it's our ability to develop and manufacture ever more complex tools. And kind of like this development of tools is nothing else what we call technology. And if we look at our very short human history, we will realize that most of the tools that we have developed actually always have helped us to basically augment our physical capabilities. So let me give you a couple of examples. So think about, for instance, the plow, which completely changed the way how we can live together because we can now do farming at a much larger and bigger scale, or the printing press, which changed the way how we exchanged and copied information and led kind of like to the age of enlightenment in Europe, or the car, which completely changed the way how we travel from A to B. And it's only in a very short time of our human history, so less than 100 years ago, that for the first time we are also able to augment not only our physical capabilities, but also our cognitive capabilities with the rise of computers and especially artificial intelligence. And I mean, artificial intelligence is obviously not a term that is very new. I mean, it was coined back then when the seven white men came together and were very enthusiastic about the idea that in essence, they could hard code the way how humans learn and reason so they can solve this with a computer. They realized that even though this was planned as a summer project, it was not so as easy to do, and it actually needed quite some time in order for them to achieve the real kind of like breakthroughs. And this is what we have kind of like seen now over the last years, that AI is really at a place kind of like where it starts to have real value and real impact to organizations. And we call, or often you might have heard the term that AI is the new electricity, and just as electricity 100 years ago changed every field and every sector, AI is basically going to transform the same today. And we just need to look kind of like what happened last year, or actually 2 years ago, when the rise of ChatGPT. And I think last year there was only one topic, and we just need to look at last year's stakeholder meeting of Google, what was the trend and the hype?
AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI as AI, 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 AI. It uses AI to bring AI, 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 AI.
So, and I mean, the impact was also clear for me. So I'm teaching a course at the Technical University of Munich, and the course that I'm teaching is a little bit different because something I realized is when I looked at all the courses that were out there, that most of the courses really focused on building artificial intelligence. And then if you go into the real economy, what you often are asked to do is actually to be able to develop concepts for AI to lead organizations with AI. For me, it's kind of like the same as always saying kind of like we are just going to build AI. It's the same as I just teach people how to build the engine of a car, and then they have to go in the economy and actually develop mobility concepts, have to be able to drive a car, or have to run and lead organizations in the car industry. And these two skills are not always the same. So back then I decided kind of like based on my experience, and I will talk in a second about it, what I did in the past, kind of like to build a course on AI for innovation and entrepreneurship, which is mainly about the management of artificial intelligence. And it was widely popular I had 40 students before ChatGPT, and then the year after, it kind of like scaled massively and had over 1,000 students. So why I am here talking about artificial intelligence? As said, my name is Tristan. I'm an AI strategist, public speaker, and an expert, especially for the management of artificial intelligence. I'm the founder of the AI Strategy Institute, a faculty member for Gen AI and AI at BCG. That means I skill up clients at BCG. I'm a lecturer for AI both at the Technical University Munich, but also at the Munich Business School. I used to build up one of the largest startup incubators in Europe, AI Founders, and worked as a senior AI strategist for Applied AI. I'm a founder also on the side, but I hope what I can do now today is share a little bit of my experience. What I noticed in the last years is one of the biggest challenges, because everyone is talking about artificial intelligence and it has been the main topic for a lot of the CEOs, CIOs in board discussions. But if you ask them kind of like, who of you is kind of like applying the first AI use cases or applying AI, most of them will lift now their hands. But if you ask them, who of you is actually able to drive real value with artificial intelligence, most of them say they're really not there. So what I want to do today and what I want to talk about is 3 points. So the first point is, what is the value of artificial intelligence? Then I want to talk a little bit about the AI value chain. And the last part I want to shortly talk about is how to drive value with AI. And then I really would like to kind of like open it to have a much more open discussion and be also available for your questions. So the question we have, what is the value of artificial intelligence? And maybe recall how more or less most of AI that we are seeing is working. So we have data that are coming in, we have AI in the middle, and we have a prediction. So for instance, just kind of like take a spam filter as an example. Data would be emails coming in. In the middle, we have the spam filter, and then it predicts if the email is spam or not spam. So I brought another example to make it more vivid, kind of like how this works. And I think it's very important to understand why an understanding of this helps us to understand how we can deliver value. Assume what we want to do is we want to build an algorithm that is able to read handwritten letters, handwritten numbers. Because, for instance, we are in a post office and there are thousands or even hundreds, thousands of mails coming in every day, and we need to sort them by zip code. So it would be very handy to build an algorithm that can kind of like read those numbers, and those numbers always look slightly different. So best to do this kind of like using a machine learning approach instead kind of like using kind of like a rule-based approach to do this. So what we're doing is kind of like we would train an algorithm on a lot of handwritten numbers. So for instance, kind of like saying, well, all these round things correspond to the number 0. These straight lines correspond to the number 1, these things to the 2, and so on. And then this algorithm learns for itself the rules, so it can take a new input, a new number it hasn't seen before, and based on this inputs, on the rules it has learned, can then say a prediction, well, is this number that I'm seeing, is it a 1 or is it a 7? So and this would be looking something like this, right? So, well, this seems to be a 7 that we're seeing. So now the question is, of an algorithm like this, what is the value? So what is the value of an algorithm that kind of like reads numbers? So the value is, I would say, nothing. And why? Because it's nothing unless we can kind of like link the prediction to an action. And this action we want to have, if we are now in the postal service that we need, okay, well, you can read a handwritten number and you can understand which is the post, kind of like the zip code. And based on the zip code I have on a letter, I will automatically sort this into a post box that I can use and then transport the mail. So, and this is how it normally looks, right? So we have a massive machinery, and then we have a very, very, very small camera somewhere. And this camera, based on this, then kind of like we have AI able to read the zip code, and based on the zip code, you see kind of like it's get directly sorted to the new thing. And only if we are able to do this, we can deliver value. And if we think about it, it's not so much about the model, but actually about the value we can deliver. And we just have to kind of like also look at what Sam Altman said about his model they built, GPT-5, and what he thinks, what is the value about it? So it's not so much of the model. So let's see what he's saying.
No, it wasn't the underlying model that mattered. It was the usability of it.
So, right, so it was not the underlying model, but the usability of it, so that people actually were using it for certain tasks, for certain actions, and this was kind of like driving the value. So if you want to understand this, basically what we have is data, then we have our AI model, then we have a prediction, and if we can link this prediction to an action, we generate value. And if we look at the economy and what I have been saying so far, this is, in my opinion, the biggest paradox of applying AI. Because on the one hand side, we have massive inflated expectations, what we can do with artificial intelligence. But then, well, mainly through research and what we're seeing, what in theory we could do and how you can use it. But then when you need and want to apply it into the economy, into your business, there is much of a difference. So there's a difference in between what you can do and how you can apply it into practice. It's much more difficult because you need much, much more. So what we have normally is fairly simple and easy, and what we see often in research and where our expectations are placed on is prediction. But then when it comes to driving real value, it takes a little bit more. So just to give you an example for this, so imagine we have a model that is able to predict whether a transaction has been fraudulent or not, because we have here a big outlier. There's not really a value until we use this model and put it in a product, for instance, for my bank. And every time I do kind of like a transaction that looks a little bit strange, then I will get kind of like a notification, and the notification asks me, well, was this a transaction you did or not? Because if not, then say no, and we're gonna cancel your card, or we're gonna block your card and make sure this transaction is nothing happening. So you need to understand that always only if it is in a product and can trigger actions, so there is a usability behind it, it will drive real value. Give you another example, and I think this is very interesting also to understand if it comes to evaluating also algorithms, and also algorithms in the context of AI Act is much more about how it is used and the action it drives. So for instance, we have a model that is able to predict if the person in the image, or I see in the camera, is you or not. And then we use this as kind of like for our iPhones, for automated banking, or kind of like to unlock our iPhones. So that seems fine. But the same model that we use Is it able to predict, is this you or not? If we use it, for instance, for mass surveillance, if I would ask most of the people, is this actually something you like, or is this something that is interesting for you? Most of the people, at least in Europe, would not lift their hand, because we don't like to be mass surveilled. And it's actually also kind of like forbidden by the AI Act in most circumstances, or it's at least high risk. But if you ask them, for instance, imagine you lost your child in a big city or in a big crowd, would you then like to have this technology to look for the child? The opinion of the people changes. So it's not so much about the model that I built, but at the end of the day, how the model is used and how the actions are triggered, and then also the value it can generate for a society or for me as a company. And in order to make this happen, I need to understand that the model stands. So we have a model, for instance, right? So kind of like this model would be in our example of the letters. The AI model is able to predict the handwritten numbers. It has to sit in a technical environment. So you have seen this big machinery that we have with the cameras in there, and that AI is often the smallest part. So it's kind of like in a technical environment, often consisting of hardware, software, and network infrastructure. And this is then included in an operational environment. So it has to be sitting somewhere on the in the post office, and people obviously have to know and have to understand how to work with it, and also not only how to work with it, but also kind of like how to monitor the performance and so on. So then we have to ask ourselves, now that we kind of like understand where AI sits in a kind of like wider business context, we need to understand, and often what is quite interesting, the AI part often is the smallest part of it. We need to understand, well, what are actually the key benefits of artificial intelligence? And when we're talking about benefits of AI, I always see kind of like 4 key benefits. And this is improving decision making, reducing the cost of doing business, personalization, and capturing and creating new value. So let me give you a couple of examples for this to just make it a bit more tangible. So improving decision making is probably one of the most important things we can do. And why is that? Just think about yourself. So where you're going to be in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now, and 5 years from now is only based on 2 factors. The first factor being good luck or good luck. And the second factor is the quality of the decisions that you're taking. So the ability to make good decisions or better decisions can really be a huge factor in deciding where you're going to be in the future. Are you going to be an organization, or going to build an organization that is competing with others or not? Depends on the decision you make. So for Meta, it might not have been the smartest decision to go into the metaverse, but now they're switching to AI. That might have been a much smarter decision, right? So it really depends on the decisions that you make, and they will have a huge impact on kind of like your outcome on life, or where your business is going to stand. So what kind, or how can AI help us to make better decisions? It allows us kind of like on certain levels to deliver value when it comes to decisions. So first of all, it can help you to understand what happened, so descriptive analytics, or why did it happen, and the next step, what will happen, and then what should happen. So to give you an example, I worked, for instance, with the Cyber Innovation Hub of the German military, and here is such a solution and how it's basically used on the battlefield in Ukraine to help you to make better decisions. So what you're going to see here is basically a solution by Palantir, and you see there's an autonomous alert. So you have kind of like satellite images, and they check, oh, there seems to be a movement of troops. So it's an alert you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So now that you know there has been something happening, you can react to it. And one reaction could be, well, why did it happen? It can tell you, well, for instance, where they're going, why it might have been happening, because there might have been an explosion. Or it can take you the decision, okay, well, we don't know it yet, and therefore we automatically deploy a drone, and you're going to see it in a second. Here, the drone is deployed to give you a better footage of kind of like the battlefield, or see what's going to happen. And based on the footage, you're going to see it in a second. Now with the drone deployed, we can have better images. So it has us even better to understand what is happening on the battleground. And what is very interesting about this use case or this product is you can see generates 3 courses of action. So it also tells you what should happen or what you can do, right? So here you see kind of like there are 3 actions I can now do in order to react to the threat of the tank, and something I would not be able to do without AI. So this is kind of like on the battlefield, this is kind of like more dual use. But think for instance, I mean, this is a nice example of the city of Munich to understand, well, how has the environment changed? So for instance, is the city actually getting greener? In order to get insights here, they have deployed a model that can detect, well, if there has been a tree, so kind of like in the city maps, they normally kind of like denoted the trees, and it's quite time consuming and expensive to have those things. And here, basically, it can tell you where those trees are actually missing. So you see kind of like there has been some construction going on. This tree is still here. You can see it, but most of the trees, because of construction, has been going on. And then you can use this information and see, for instance, well, you ask yourself the question, well, is the city of Munich actually getting greener or less green? And then you can have kind of like these comparison over time. And then one thing you can do is kind of like to help you decide is actually, okay, well, it would be important to actually plant more trees. So this helps me, this information can help me to drive decisions that I have. Another thing that we have kind of like as key benefits of AI is it can help you to reduce the cost of doing business. And there are plenty of examples for this. And one of example that we have is kind of like obviously now with ChatGPT, and we see what are kind of like early impacts on of ChatGPT on doing certain tasks. And here you have kind of like a treatment group, so one group that has been allowed to use ChatGPT, and a control group, one group that has not been allowed to use ChatGPT for the same task. And you see how actually kind of like the time decreased for the people that were using ChatGPT. Yet at the same time, the quality of the outcome has been increasing. And we're going to talk a little bit about this also at the later point of the presentation. And then what we have as well is so this was basically here. This was an example when I was working at so my first job back then. I was working for a startup in AI in radiology, and they had kind of like AI decision support. And you can basically see here what it helped you kind of like detect anomalies, and then helped radiologists to reduce time so they can spot the anomalies directly on the one hand side, and then on the other hand side, it helped to reduce the errors. Another key benefit that we see is personalization. So it helps you, it allows you to work much more personalized. So on what we have when it comes to personalization, what we know is often the company Netflix, and each Netflix account looks completely different. But what very little people actually know or realize, that it's not only kind of like this personalization that we have of the movies that we get, but also they vary the images that we're gonna see. So the first image of a movie is called a thumbnail, and the thumbnail, they realized it's one of the most important factors to determine if you're gonna watch the movie or not. So for each movie they generate a lot of different thumbnails. And then regarding if you, for instance, watched in the past a lot of romantic comedy movies, you will see a couple kissing. But if you, for instance, watched a lot of comedies, what you will see is, for Good Will Hunting, you will see more a comedian. Or if you have been a fan of Uma Thurman or John Travolta, what you're gonna see first is basically the person on the movie of Pulp Fiction. And the last thing that we have is capture and create new value. And this can happen either that AI can help me to improve existing products that I have by introducing a new product feature, or I can build now completely new products that I couldn't do before. So let's give you an example for a product feature. So this is a present that I bought for my mother on Christmas. It's a bird feeder, and this bird feeder kind of has a camera that connects to your phone, and every time a bird flies in, it takes a picture of the or a video of the bird, and you can watch it on your phone. And there's a light version and there's an AI version. And the AI version, what it can do is basically not only takes the video, but as you're going to see here, it can also recognize what kind of bird it is. And we're going to talk later about it, how we can translate this into value. Another example for maybe a completely new product that wasn't possible before, I really love this example. So we're going to see it here.
Artificial intelligence has become indispensable to everyday life, and not keen to fall behind, the French fiscal authorities are getting in on the act. But in a rather unusual way. Using satellite images, they've constructed an algorithm to detect swimming pools which have not been declared to the authorities.
We can see on this aerial photograph, which you have on the right-hand side, a swimming pool next to the house. If we cross-check the land registry, there is no trace of the swimming pool.
So far, they've found 20,000 pools over 9 departments across France, which corresponds to just under 10 billion euros in lost revenue for the finance department. At a time of tight public purse strings, and with a looming economic slowdown, this is money France cannot afford to just wash away. After various heat waves this summer, many in France decided to install pools in their gardens. As a result, they increased the value of their properties, and thus the amount of property taxes that were owed.
So, and you see it, just to kind of like make my point from the beginning very clear, in order to do a use case where you basically go from I actually can detect swimming pools to actually I have something where I can make 10 million, the product will look completely different, and it's often overlooked. So the prediction here I have on the one hand side is, well, is this a swimming pool or not? But in order to have a system that creates value, I need so much more, because I also need to check this information. Is there a swimming pool in the garden or not, against the land registry, to understand, is the swimming pool registered or not? And then I also need to kind of like put it into a system, and the system needs to be used by people, and they need to understand how to use it. And this is something, so I will have another talk on AI where kind of like we'll talk exclusively about this use case and how to go basically from the business value, kind of like from prediction, how to create value, and how to do kind of like a project management for this thing. So if you want to kind of like, if you find today interesting and want to learn more, there are kind of like, I also have two another talks, and one I'm going to especially talk about this example because I really like it. So the last point, or not the last point, the next point I want to talk about is a little bit about the AI value chain and how we can understand different organizations and businesses that we have in AI. So as a foundation, what we have, and you might be kind of like used to kind of like this layer model, what you often see in VC. What I don't like about this layer model, they just talk about kind of like these different layers of AI startups that are interesting to invest in. But there are actually much more types of businesses that make money from kind of like the AI hype. So, and on the ground, kind of like ascending or descending everything, we have this infrastructure and talent layer. So there we have data. We've seen we need data to training, and there are companies that provide you with data. There are companies that whose service is to label data that I need to train my models. Then we have compute. So think about NVIDIA. They're providing the compute not only to train my models, but also to do the inferencing of my models. And then I have the expertise. So I need to have people that understand how to use AI, how to build those models, how to train those models, how to apply them. So there's kind of like this expertise level is also transcending all those layers. And if you think about it, what we have then is this core AI technology. So think about from Meta, the Llama model, or from Google, the Gemini, or OpenAI, GPT. So this is a core AI technology. And what we have seen here in the past, that these models are very, very similar, and it's kind of like a war of attrition. So it's very difficult to figure out who has kind of like the best model, and it's going to be a big fight. For us as consumers of those models, super nice, because it's going to push down the cost of those models. But if you are a company in the field, it's going to be very difficult kind of like to create a long-term value. And I think we will see probably at some point a lot of companies that are building some of these foundational models to go out of business. Then what we have is kind of like this AI development enablement layer or facilitator layer. A lot of these no or low code tools or things that help me to do AI. Think about startups like Langdog that kind of like fix certain things. So for me, it's now easier to understand how to train the models or what's happening in those models. Jupyter Notebook is an example for an AI development enablement layer company or the company that provides this. And then we have application layers. So these are kind of like the companies or startups, kind of like it's real applications. So if you think about it, OpenAI has probably a lot of different things. So they have obviously expertise and they provide a lot of expertise, but they are building GPT-3 or GPT-4 and soon GPT-5. But ChatGPT is an application layer product, so to say. And there's kind of like a lot of startups that we're seeing coming out, DeepL application layer startup, right? Because they deliver kind of like real application of AI to deliver a certain value. And then something that is really important and we should not overlook is kind of like the end user. The end user, so the people who are going to use artificial intelligence, the people who are going to use DeepL, the people who are using ChatGPTs. These are customers, individual customers or organizations. And these are the ones who are paying for this. Because if they fall away, if we don't have an end user, right? So if you think about it, the value is only created if we find someone who's going to profit from it, or who's can use it at the end. And they are the people who are going to pay for it. If the end user is falling flat, then this whole value chain is going to crumble and we are not able to deliver any kind of value because there's no money coming down. There's no business around it. I mean, something like GPT-5 or GPT-4 is only valuable when a company wants to use it because they can make certain processes faster or better and can have cost savings. And these are the ones, or you are the ones who are paying for this, right? And only if this works, this whole things work. And now we have also a new layer that is kind of like going around it, and it's kind of like the regulation and compliance layer. So there are now more companies coming out making money with this. And you can really kind of like think about this, how this works, and how you can basically every company or every service that is related to AI fit somewhere into these kind of like model in these layers. And the last thing as well. Sorry, this is not the right one, how to drive value, but how can I think about driving value with AI in my organization? And because the organization is the end user, and one big task of them is if the end users don't understand how you can make the application valuable, they're not gonna buy it. So one of the big tasks of all these people, especially in the application layer, is having a good understanding of your end user and understanding how you can help them to solve their problems. And we're gonna see a big change in kind of like how organizations gonna be in the future. And just think of, this is very extreme what Sam Altman back then said in an interview. So let's see what he said.
I think there will be a one-person, $1 billion company soon. Because you'll just have like AI doing so much of the work in ways that are difficult to imagine today.
So basically, his prediction that in the future, we're going to see a new kind of organization, the AI-enabled organization, that in theory, but this is very extreme, right? In theory, would be able, where you have just one person who probably kind of like on this person who's registered and who gets the money, but all the operations, the whole organization, he built it up, but it's running with artificial intelligence. So let's think about how, if I'm an organization, we are not there yet, but we have to think about how I, as an organization, can actually use artificial intelligence. And what we have is kind of like we have AI. On the one hand side, how we can implement AI in my organization. On the one hand side, we have the offerings, and we're talking about offerings. We have our products and services, and we need to think about how an AI can basically enhance existing products and services, or create new products or services, do new things of businesses that were not possible before. Typical AI startup on the one side. And I show you kind of like examples of this. And then on the other side, we have to think about not only about the products or the offerings that I have, but also about the processes. And it often helps to think about 3 different kind of processes. So the first process I have would be universal processes. So these are things that everyone does. So everyone is writing emails, for instance, right? Or everyone is kind of like making presentations or writing. And ChatGPT would, for instance, a solution that kind of like fits in there, because everyone kind of like, or mostly everyone does something, and this would be a universal process because everyone does this, or kind of like time clocking. Everyone needs to do it. It works for a company, and if you have AI that does automatically time clocking for you, it's applicable to everyone. Then you have industry and function-specific processes. So these might be function-specific process might be HR. So it doesn't affect everyone in the organization, just the HR department. And the nice thing is, if you work in the HR department of company A and then you go to company B, the processes will look very similar. Or if you're in an industry, let's think about education in schools. The school system and the processes in school A or B look very similar. Or in a hospital, processes A and B look very similar. And then you have processes that you just have in your organization. And if you think about it, how to apply AI here, what you think about it, the more we go from the one side to the other side, the more general, so more people deal with this. And it's not in your organization, but across all the organizations. And here it's more unique. So when it comes to deploying or building your own AI, it doesn't often make sense to be here because, I mean, there might be a lot of solutions already existing outside that can really help you, right? And here it might more sense before you go there to buy or source a solution that you can find in the market. Or, I mean, on the other hand side, you should, if you kind of like decide to build something in-house, right? Then you should only do it for kind of like processes or where there's no fitting solution out there. And it should be for kind of like processes that are very unique for you. I mean, it doesn't really, would it make a lot of sense for BMW, for instance, with their kind of like team of developers to build suddenly a solution for their HR department? Probably not so much, but does it make much more sense to have something on their assembly line or on their manufacturing line? Much, much more. So what I need to do in order to understand this, I always need to try to connect this to real value that I can generate. So even if I have AI in my offerings, what it should do or need to do in order to be profitable for me and have a positive return on investment, it needs to increase my revenue. So give you the example again that we had of the bird feeder, right? And we can see there's the version without AI and with AI. And the version without AI, the light version, sells at a much lower price, and kind of like the bird feeder here sells at a much higher price. So this could mean either I can have much more customers now because it's more attractive because we're using AI, I can demand a higher price, or I can now demand a lower price, but reach much more customers. As long as I kind of like increases my revenue, will be valuable. Or think about what should happen if I put it in my processes. There are 2 considerations I need to think about. On the one hand side, does it reduce the cost that I'm having? Or can it maybe increase the quality of my offerings and then again help me make more money? So just think about it. I give you a nice example now of the company Ant Financial. And they basically they do a lot of things, but one product they are a lending provider for credits for individuals. And just to give you an example, so I think 2 years ago I took out a credit for my startup, and it took me, I think, 3 months just to get this credit. And and sometimes it's very important that you kind of like get the credit fast. And I was super annoyed, super pissed because I really needed the money, didn't know what to do, waited for ages. And they have a process, it's called 310. So it says, well, it takes 3 minutes to apply online via the app, 1 second for approval, and 0 manual labor is involved. And within 24 hours, you have the money on your bank account. So first of all, if you think about it, how costly the process is kind of like just to run the process for my bank, where kind of like 5 or 10 people are involved. Here, no person is involved. And how long it took. So this is also kind of like cheaper. I mean, they are able in 2018 have been able to via much more credits than any of the other banks, right, at a much lower cost. And also it's much faster. So even though this might be a little bit more expensive, I might pay a little bit more taxes, there's a huge benefit. I mean, I would feel the offerings of them is much better because it just takes 24 hours for me to have the money. For the others, it takes 3 months. So I probably might go for them. And also for them, it costs much less. So what they had, they didn't have even higher kind of like fees that you had to pay, but also lowers. And you can really see this in the valuation of the company. So you have to think about it. It became one of the most valuable companies that are out there. And if you think about it with the cost structure, because how they have set up their business, they can do the same or even more than other banks, but they just have a fraction of the people employed. So the Bank of China has over 100,000 employees, and Financial has under 10,000 employees or under 20,000 employees. Bank of China has something like 10,000 physical branches, and Group or and Financial has no physical branch. Just think about the cost structure and how much you can save. And that's very important. And in general, kind of like if you think about how to apply AI, you obviously should always go for the solutions or kind of like think about what is the real value can drive over it. What is the effect on my P&L? And quite often thinking about which are the use cases that will help me to deliver the most of the value. And what is very important is a last point, kind of like really try to come from the problem and not think about AI as the solution of everything. And just kind of like to show you one example, AI might not be always the best way to go forward. And here's an example how this can look like.
Mike's bike riding is a real technical challenge for us.
I'm not your great bike.
Exactly.
No, but I got it.
Okay, good.
He can't ride. So what we do is get a stunt rider to perform the body part of Mike. Run it through our software to get the movement wireframe. Take Mike's head, composite it on the animated body, drop in the background, and we end up like this. You would not believe the man hours that went into that 3-second shot.
Could you not have just got someone to teach him how to ride a bike?
So you see, it doesn't always make sense to use AI. Maybe there are different solutions out there. And something I want to say when it comes to AI, and this might be counterintuitive or not counterintuitive, but we always have the tendency that we want to build things, but often, I mean, cheap solutions or solutions out there in the market can be very valuable. We see this with ChatGPT. And if you think about it in the 60s and 70s, if you were an organization and wanted to use a computer, you needed to have a very expensive team of experts and a big room, and they built a computer just for you, just for your need. You need to pay the experts, you need to pay the room, the computer, and so on. And then they also run this computer, and how difficult it was, and how much knowledge and money you needed. And now I mean, even my baker or my hairdresser is using a computer to do their operations. Do they know how to build a computer together? No, it's becoming more and more easy. And I want to also let you think about it. It doesn't always make sense to kind of like build the things from yourself. If there is maybe an AI solution on the market that can add a lot of value for me, why not use it, right? So, and it's very important to understand kind of like when it comes to this, and understanding also for your own business or for your own line of work, how AI and different AI tools can be helpful for me. Because AI won't replace any humans, but humans that know how to use AI will replace humans without AI. And we see kind of like how this effect has been, and it's not going to replace any jobs, but it's going to change really kind of like the composition of your work. We see kind of like here some results with ChatGPT that for certain tasks, you need much fewer time, but for other tasks, you need more. And at the end of the day, it's not that AI or humans, but you also in your work need to understand how you can improve by or with using artificial intelligence. And when we're looking at organizations, it's the same, that's true. So AI won't replace organizations, but organizations that know how to use AI will replace organizations that don't know how to use AI. And I hope you find the talk insightful. Feel free to connect with me and to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm super active and always happy to exchange and share. And yeah, and leave comments if you have questions. Let me know. This was my 45 minutes talk about how to drive value with AI, and there are 2 more talks coming up. So looking forward maybe to see you again.
Thank you so much, Tristan. That was so interesting. I love the examples as well. So now, please ask all your questions in the chat, and then we'll make sure that we'll cover them to the best of our abilities. I see we already have some questions. So let us pop them. So we have a question: how do you have? Do you have projects links available for tree mapping in Munich? How they did it?
So this is, I think, when I took this from a Medium page. So if you Google tree mapping Munich, you should find kind of like this project on Medium. Or if you don't find it, then just shoot me a message on LinkedIn, and then I will kind of like send you the Medium article to it where they talk about it.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question. Philip is curious if there's now undetectable pool flooring available.
I don't know, but what is I think more interesting is what you have is when we look at the example of the that I showed about how AI is used in the Ukraine war, that they often have those dummies that from the sky look like real tanks or something, so it's harder for them to detect. So there will be always kind of like ways, if you have tool or technology, how people are gonna use the faults or the things where they're not so good to play with the weaknesses and kind of like to find their workarounds. But it might be, I don't know.
Sounds good. And we have another question from Philip. How viable and sustainable do you see AI wrappers and fine-tuned models when the bigger, next, better foundation model might be even better at your specific use case than your X-1 generation fine-tuned model?
Wait, this is a long one.
It's a complex one.
So, I mean, you have to ask yourself, like, depending on for what you want to use it, right? So, I mean, Sam Altman says it now all the time, and it's kind of like his main message is you shouldn't build any products that is kind of like working on fixing something that is currently not working well with ChatGPT, and you build the things around it. And you need to understand. I mean, there's a lot of value in generating a short-term solution, but the question is, do you want to drive long-term value or you want to drive short-term value? And you need to understand well how you can make your business defensible and sustainable for a long time. And then I don't think it's very sustainable maybe to build a wrapper, but what could happen is by building a product, I mean, this is kind of like the idea of this flywheel of AI. You get more data, you have more users, and the users help you to create more data. You have a better understanding, might there something else that they need, and then based on this you can maybe improve the product to an extent that OpenAI or these don't have, because you have other insights, or you can build a completely new product out of it. So I wouldn't say just because he says in the future it doesn't really make a lot of sense that now it doesn't make sense to do it. I mean, think about it. A lot of people have been making a lot of money kind of like just for the last year, providing you with ChatGPT, kind of like talks or workshops on ChatGPT, how to do the promptings. Within the next half a year or next year, these workshops, they will not sell anymore because everyone knows how to do prompting. It becomes a basic task that we have. But just by going so much in the niche, they will maybe focus on new tools, and they will not give you ChatGPT trainings, but they will give you new trainings because they have a much better understanding of the market. And this has value in itself then as well.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question from Joba. Is AI reliable enough to take humans off sensitive processes like credit approval? Couldn't clients learn to game the system?
So I think so. What the question is, and I think it shouldn't be like this. It's very black or white, right? So you can either, if you think about no human or so just human or no human. But there are a lot of actions that you have in between, where kind of like you have maybe human does the task, and then you have AI telling you, hey, you should maybe look closer on this. I don't believe that this guy should get a credit. Or you have a decision where kind of like AI kind of like selects, does all the credit wiring and says, okay, well, these 10 people, not so sure about it. Please, as human, can you look over it, right? So this is what we call human in the loop. There are different versions of it where we go from a spectrum from the task is exclusively done by a human to it's fully automated. And some things doesn't really make sense a lot to be fully automated, especially if you're talking about credit. The AI Act also kind of like forbids to be completely for it to be completely automated, and we need to understand, right? We need to understand really depending on the process and also through the technology. Doesn't mean because it's not possible now that it will be possible in the next 1 year or 2 years. So we constantly need to revise those things. If you think about it, I mean, chatbots were something very difficult to do 2 years ago with kind of like ChatGPT and all this stuff. Chatbots, everyone can now build a chatbot.
Sounds good, thank you. So a question from Bastien. Which regulatory or compliance-related hurdles have you seen when companies experiment or deploy AI projects? Is it the AI Act of or ISO 42001 a good topic yet?
So I mean, I'm not too deep in the regulatory process yet, but this is one of the main concerns about the AI Act in general. That a lot of things that were possible or at least relatively cheap to do become now much more expensive to do. Just think about it's very similar to kind of like the getting your company registered or your product registered as medical device. It's also a regulatory hurdle. And there are companies in Europe who don't bring their products out in Europe anymore because it is too costly just because of compliance reasons, and they do it in the US. And this is one of the big challenges. On the one hand side, we need something like regulation and compliance because there is certain harm that we can do. And the challenge is like, how much do they hinder actually development of certain things? And I mean, it's very upsetting when I hear kind of like working with customers and they say, well, we don't even know in the future if we can build this or if we can use this or if we can still continue working with Microsoft because we are not sure with this. And this is going to be a massive challenge in the future to get more understanding. The challenge right now is we know the AI is coming, but we don't know yet what we have to do, how to put it into practice. And there's going to be a lot of money, especially on consulting side, to be made on people who have this knowledge how to employ it.
Sounds good, thank you. And which tools do you use for on a daily basis when there's no code at all?
So my brain, obviously, I think still human thinking is very important in a lot of things that I'm doing, and then I mean, for me, I just know for my task, ChatGPT has been a tremendous game changer. I think a lot of the things that I'm doing, and I'm doing a lot of things, wouldn't be possible without ChatGPT. Just kind of like all the things that I have to do. I think it in some cases doubled my productivity, and a lot of things I couldn't do without this tool. So I really noticed like, oh, it happens from time to time that it's down, and I'm also down a bit.
Very nice. And how do you make AI projects?
Well, this is something for the next time. So make sure to follow Data Scientist or Data Scientist Germany or me, and then there you will get notice or notification about where we talk about this kind of like AI project from end to end, how to think about it.
Very nice. Very nice transition into the next one as well. Do you have any use cases showing the value of text analytics?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are a lot of use cases when it comes to sentiment analysis and understanding what people think. And I think so. I'm doing also in the future, if you're interested, a talk on AI and the impact on PR and journalism. And so a little bit of spoiler alert. And one of my main insights is if you think about how people or journalists do kind of like PR at the moment, is they communicate from the inside out and often don't notice how it's going on. And now with with kind of like text analytics, it allows you kind of like to do sentiment analysis and also, for instance, understand what people from the outside are actually saying about your company, or what they are actually saying about products of customers that are very similar to you. If you want to understand it, it's an older use case, but a very cool use case done by the British National Museum, where they basically used text analytics to understand what people were saying about them, about the museum, in kind of like on Yelp or Booking.com, or kind of like just kind of like on the internet. And because of that, they realized, for instance, there were a lot of problems with the toilets, and they cleaned the toilets more often to improve the service they had. So these are things that I think are very cool with kind of like text analytics.
Yeah, that's for sure. And what's the best AI platform for learning?
So it really depends. There are not so many that are focused on kind of like AI and connecting business value. I mean, this is why probably my course has been very successful, and there's kind of like this niche for me, because, as I said, it's always about how to build AI. I mean, data scientist is certainly very good. Obviously, I like so when I have kind of like smaller coding exercises in my courses, I use a lot of examples from Kaggle. That's very nice, because I always like to connect, for instance, when I do kind of like some exercises as part of my course, to connect them to real life use cases or real life things. And then Kaggle has a lot of these things when it comes to learning.
Perfect. Sorry, yeah. For using AI for improving personalization, do you have any suggestions on how to measure and showcase value? Can you please explain the Netflix thumbnail example?
Yeah. So I mean, for the Netflix thumbnail example, to go to a little bit back, I mean, there's also a very nice Medium article where I took the example from, and the idea with the personalization here was they realized if you are a Netflix user, what they want to reduce churn. So they want to see how many people stay on Netflix, and they realized that people that spend a lot of time going through videos are more likely to churn and leave it, because they don't get value out of it. And they have something in the background that tracks basically how long do you need in order to find the movie that you like. And the nice thing about and Netflix is really kind of like an AI factory. So if you want to know more about AI factory, you should read the book Competing in the Age of AI. And the whole idea about it, they think they're like AI first and fake AI on a big scale. And what they basically do and how they kind of like work with it and how they tested it is they have maybe 1 million users, right? Or they have much more 1 million users. So then they do simple A/B testing, right? So they have this new feature where you get kind of like this recommended thumbnails, and they release it out to 1,000 people, and the rest they will not know it. And then they just compare the churn rates of the people who have this new feature and who have not the new feature. And then they look at the churn rate and realize, okay, well, this new feature reduces the churn rate drastically. But in order to be able to do so, you really need to build up a company in an AI factory that you can kind of like run these tests with massive people, with A/B tests, without kind of like a lot of effort.
Sounds good. Thank you. And then I believe we have a last question from Ratul. As AI technologies are changing very fast, how can a job seeker prepare with the fast-changing technologies?
So, I mean, this is, for instance, the nice thing about what I'm teaching. So this is the challenge when it comes to, I mean, there are experts who are experts more on the tool level. This is what you're seeing, kind of like the technology that's changing very fast. And here you need to keep up all the time, up to date. But what I talk to you today are kind of like more the management topics, and they are not going to change. I mean, I've been now working in the field for 6, 7, 8 years, and kind of like these management models, they are more or less kind of like staying the same over time. And I think it's very important just kind of like be open and learn a lot and have a basic understanding how those things fit in together, and that they are actually changing all the time. But if you have kind of like this framework and a concept, and are very similar to my education. I mean, I'm an economist, right? So what I learn as economist, you learn basic frameworks to think about the world that surrounds you. And if a new problem or a new challenge is coming up, you think in these models that you have learned about the world. And it's very similar when it comes kind of like, and this is the nice thing about this, my kind of like AI management tool, management course, that you have these models and you can really fastly think about, okay, well, what does it mean? So why, for instance, is a company like NVIDIA suddenly so successful? Because they're only ones that are in the compute layer, and the compute layer is everywhere, all over the value chain, and they're the only one competing in here. So they're able to reap a lot of the money because they will get always paid for any application they have.
Very nice, thank you. I think that was the last question. So I think we'll great. Congrats, you answered them all.
Thank you.
So thank you so much again, Tristan, for joining us today. I believe the next session we'll have with you is on June 28th. So we look really forward to it. In the meantime, for everyone who joined, thank you so much for joining. You can follow our data scientist channels on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram as well. We have Data Scientist and Data Scientist Germany for international. And on that note, thank you everyone, and have a great end of the day. I don't know, Tristan, if you want to say something just to close.
Yeah, I mean, thank you everyone for joining again. Connect with me. Also, always great. I mean, there's a lot of hard blood and effort going into the things I'm doing and to teaching. If you like it, I'm always happy about feedback or also things that it could be improved to even make this experience much better. And yeah, the age of AI is a very exciting age, and I think something that is overlooked most of the time. I feel the age of AI is still a very much human age. So it's all about what we make out of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, everyone. And have a great rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye.